I'm not done yet, but I'm on the way out. And I heard some pastor wrote this book, and the gist of it was you can't ever shorten your time in the wilderness, but you sure can lengthen it.
Welcome to the BadAss Dad podcast. KDH here on the microphone in the Iron Yeti studios. And man, once again, super excited to have my friend Ryan Owens. How you doing, buddy?
I'm well, Kevin.
Let me rephrase it. Employed,
Ryan. That's right. That's Owens. A big distinction these days. After 5.5 months, that's a celebration for sure,
dude. So we're going to get into it here in just a minute, but when we had you on the mic on episode 65, and you were telling your story back in May, man, the world was in total chaos for everyone with COVID and all the other craziness and, riots and blah, blah, blah. And then on top of all that, as if that's not enough, and raising a teenage son.
Yeah, I didn't notice the riots or COVID a whole lot, man, to be honest with you. It was just another thing. My world was imploding.
Absolutely. You have a divorce that's finalized. And then if that's not enough, lose a job, and they take the car.
The next day, the day after I was here, they took the car.
Oh my gosh.
That's right.
And so that was May. So thank God May is over.
Yeah.
But you have weathered the storm. And I was telling you just a minute ago, I had a friend of mine that just recently passed away, a young guy in his mid-30s. And my wife and I had walked he and his wife through the adoption process. And it was really tragic that he passed away. But I was meeting with the wife, and we were talking through some things. And she goes, hey, I got to run here pretty quickly. I got to go get the oil changed in my car. And, that's when it hit me that all the other crap that's going on, I still got to change the oil in my car. Yeah. And it made me think about you. And I kind of gave you a little, analogy earlier, but man, catch us up, man. I know there's been the oil still need to be changed and things, with your world, but these last 5 months, you're now employed. So at least there's one thing that's, getting some stability there, but man, how you feeling, man?
I got to tell you, man, now I turned a huge corner. October 26th was when I started my new job, and that was a huge corner, obviously professionally and bringing some income in, but personally as well, just getting back in the chair and feeling like I'm adding some value to the corporate world again. That was kind of fun. And, the job that I've gotten, God is so good, man. It's such a perfect fit for what I've got going on. It's a little humbling. I'm stepping back from a director level position where I was and a couple steps back into a rep role now. But, the money's sufficient, no travel, hardly at all.
Okay.
I'll have a handful of overnights here and there, but
yeah,
I went from covering 13 states to now I have half the state of Colorado, and that's it.
Yeah.
And so for what I need to do with Joshua and to honor the schedule with his mom and doing all that, it's ideal. Let alone I was selling a prostate cancer drug before.
Okay.
Well, I'm now selling a very similar drug,
okay,
just in a different form, to the same customers, the same disease.
So all established relationships and
a lot of established relationships.
Wow.
Yes, a lot of established clinical knowledge with it. So the learning curve is not quite so steep. And there were a couple of jobs that I was looking at. I really thought I was going to get over the summer in epilepsy and Alzheimer's disease and all kinds of stuff that would have been a tremendously new market for me. And so the learning curve would have been huge.
Yeah.
And so now I get to kind of build on that and then offer value right away to some of my colleagues, which is fun.
That's cool
to do. Yeah.
Well, a lot of guys, when they're, especially like transitioning out of like say military or even law enforcement, some of the challenges they go through is they've got a camaraderie, they got their community that's there. They've got a structure, that they know how to do. Sure. They feel like they have a purpose where they are. And not to project on you, but, so much of your world was ripped away from you. And, whether it is community, although I feel like, you're probably going to talk a little bit about how community has been tremendous for you.
Yeah.
Restructuring some things, even purpose, I know you've been evaluating all those things, but, how does that feel now? Now that, you're getting some footing underneath you a little bit.
Yeah.
So
Josh and I both had a little break this afternoon, and we had about a 45-minute break together, and we ended up going for a bike ride. And then we were circling back around and ran into some of the neighbors, and they were out just walking. And they said, "Oh, well, we got to go. We got to get back to our structure." And so, "Oh, yeah, you got to work now, don't you?" I said, "I know this work thing, man. All this getting back on a schedule. I mean, geez, they want something from me if they're going to pay me, you know." And but I got to tell you, the perspective that I have now, after having all the time in the world to do whatever I wanted, whenever I wanted, but not having an income to know whether if I should spend this money or not. And so you just kind of hole up. I mean, let alone the world had shut down with COVID and all that stuff. But I'm a structure guy. I like having a schedule. That's one of the things I stayed committed to, though. After all the junk hit the fan, and even through the job loss, I never changed my bedtime alarm and my wake up alarm on my phone. I stayed committed to the things that I know are just critical for me, for my own soul. And I get up every morning, I get in my chair, and that's where I start every single day. And so, you know, I can tell you story after story about moments in that chair over this summer. And now, you know, I have a little less time to sit in the chair, and I'm just so grateful for that.
Yeah.
It's fun.
Well, talk to us a little bit about that. I mean, you know, guys, having a morning routine is incredibly important, I think, for all of us, but to have those things that are those anchor skills, those anchor, you know, habits that you have, you know, I wrote down pillars, but those things that how you start your day. And I'm sure that just having those things in place gave you at least some stability to be able to go, at least I know I can do this.
Right.
How do you start your day? What have you been doing? Yeah.
So every single day, my alarm goes off at 4:45 a.m. every day. I hit the snooze button.
4:45?
4:45.
And that's in the morning.
That is in the morning. Yeah. Sometimes before the sun comes up. So I hit the snooze button a couple times, I'll be honest, but sometimes more than others.
Yep.
But usually my goal is to be in the chair with my coffee and the Bible open, with my journal, with a couple of books that I read that sit right next to my fireplace. And I know that I'm going to start every day with a deep breath, right? With my cup of coffee. Usually the dog comes in and lays down next to me. And it's just this moment where I just kind of inhale and just go, okay, here we go. And, you know, I read a variety of things. You know, the scriptures are always included on that in the morning. And then sometimes it's, you know, I'll read one chapter. Sometimes I'll read 10 chapters. Sometimes I read 2 verses and I sit there and I journal for an hour. Sometimes I just sit, and honestly, sometimes I fall back asleep.
Yeah.
In the chair. But I know, and then I have the iPad that I use to read from. It at 6:30, the brightness changes. So I know that at 6:30, it's like, okay, time to transition to what's your schedule for the day, what's the next phone call you have to do, what's this or that. And I've done that. I mean, that's just been kind of a religious routine for me for many, many years. And, you know, when the junk hits the fan, you start grasping for your foothold.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, you and I have talked at length, you know, in other conversations, and, you know, Jesus is everything. He really, really is. And I just can't imagine how people make it through things that I faced. And at the same time, man, I'm on the other side of this. And the more that I've shared my story, the more I've heard from other people. It's kind of like, you know, when we were going through infertility years ago, or whatever you face, you start talking about it.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, because you were, you know, forthcoming and open and candid with your story, people are like, oh man, well, my brother or my dad or me, you know, whatever. Yeah. And they just start, blah, you know, throwing up on you. And I love that, because I'm listening to these other guys tell their story. Just this past weekend, I was in Moab doing some mountain biking, and dude, that was awesome.
Yeah.
And, you know, so I'm starting to enjoy this single life a little bit, which is, that was not on my mind back in May.
Sure.
And now I'm realizing there's a lot I want to do and that I can do. And so anyway, we're at Moab and we go through this just epic, you know, adrenaline-filled day of lots of dangerous cliffs and drops and whatever on the mountain bike. And then we get over a beer in the hot tub with one of the other guys, and he's like, hey, I heard you mentioned something about a divorce. And yeah, well, I'm this. And we had like a 2-hour-long conversation.
Wow.
And this guy hasn't seen his kid in like 2 years. And Kevin, I was like, wow, I'm lucky. Like, how hard is that for me to say now, then, or back in May or whenever, but to look back and understand how gracious God has been, and I have to give a lot of credit to my ex-wife that she could have made this thing a whole lot worse. I could have made it a whole lot worse for her, but we both care about Joshua tremendously. And so all that to say, it can always be worse. And if you're paying attention to other people's stories, you learn real fast it could be a whole lot worse. And so just one more way to count your blessings and one more way to be grateful for what you do have instead of focusing on, what I lost and all the routine that I had to change and what had to change for Joshua and what had to change for everybody.
Yeah.
In our circle, it could be so much worse. So anyway, all back to the footholds, and the pillars. I mean, those things, spending time with God every morning is just push the reset button. No matter what happens the day before, my alarm's going to go off at 4:45. I'm going to hit the snooze button. I'm going to get up and smell the coffee brewing and sit for a moment. And I'm going to sit down and I'm just going to take that deep breath and go, okay, I made it through that. There's nothing I can't, whatever,
That's
whatever.
good.
That's been my theme is, all right, Lord, whatever. And just.
But not like, all right, whatever.
Well, sometimes, let's be honest, right?
So sometimes you get the teenage girl angst, and you go, whatever.
I mean, back in May when I lost my job, I think I remember saying it in that episode, like, I cannot believe I have to face this and this. Like, are you serious?
Yeah.
I can't believe that. But, as you go through, I don't know if I shared last time or not, but the old hymn, It Is Well, right? Whatever comes, Jesus doesn't change. His value that he places on me doesn't change. And so my life might be a little more difficult. It might be a little more lonely, less affectionate maybe, in those intimate ways. But, his love for me never changed. And it has been so refreshing to just encounter him in fresh and new ways through people that I hadn't talked to in years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden I get a message from them to say, hey, you've been on my mind. And here's, something that I feel like I should tell you. And it was exactly what I was asking God for the day before, or just asking a question and saying, man, what is going on? And how do I process this? And then somebody shows up with an article. Or one of my favorite stories was, I have a buddy named Dave out that is a former colleague of mine. And we were managers together at the company and just a real strong believer. And we ran together a bunch. And he called me just out of the blue one day. And he knew my story, he knew what was going on. Yeah. Called me out of the blue and he goes, hey man, I was thinking about you. I heard this song and I got to call Ryan. I got to tell him about it. And I listened to that song the next day or that day. And then it's on a playlist all by itself over and over and over. And the chorus is, you can do whatever you want to, right? I'll make room for you to do whatever you want to. And it's a worship song. And and part of the chorus is, your way is always better because your way is better and I will make room for you to do whatever you want to.
Yeah.
And, I think, we talked about this before. I never would have set my marriage aside. I never would have quit. I never would have been as open as I am now to what's next. And I don't know what that is still, but I've plugged back in with a really good group of guys, the guys I went to Moab with, just strong believers, guys that love God and are just encouraging me all along, all my community, you guys in the neighborhood. And I mean, that's not stopped. It's just getting more and more rich as we go. I've got 2 roommates now.
Yeah.
We got Coach and we got John and we jokingly call our house the bachelor pad. We're taking new names. I think we need to get a little more creative for that. But just to be around guys and experiencing life, and we've all had our hurts and we've all had our heartaches, but we come together and we're just grateful together. So it's fun, man. And then I started a life group, leading the men's group now on Wednesday nights through the church, and I wouldn't have done that before. And
so let me ask you, I mean, it feels like you've navigated these waters, really well. And I've seen, several guys that have gone through this and it is, I'll say typical. The guys go one of two directions. They'll either isolate, total
Yeah.
isolation. And I get it. I get that. Or they'll go the other direction where they're like, I do not want to be alone. I'm going to do whatever I can. I'm going to get my calendar so filled up with that. How have you been able to balance that? I mean, have there been moments where you've just felt like, shit, I don't want to be around anybody. I need this. And have you navigated that? Or have you even caught yourself going, man, do I really want to go to this party, or I just don't want to be alone?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, there's definitely times that I'll be alone and I'll be like, man, I got to talk to somebody. And then I realize, no, just sit here, sit in the suck for a minute, and recognize it's okay. I'm okay. Because I'm alone, but I've got all these people that I could call. So I'm not really alone. It's okay. And that's been hard for me because I love people. I'm kind of I tend to be a people pleaser. And so I can't stand it when somebody's not happy with me. And so if I don't know what the feedback is, then my default is, well, they must not be okay with me or whatever.
Yeah.
And, to face some of those inner insecurities, I guess, it has been fun to shore those up that, no, it's okay. To more to your point and to answer your question, there's been several times that I've been at parties. I was at a party at Halloween, and we're just in the driveway and doing our thing, and I reached the point where I'm done, and I did the Irish goodbye. I just kind of drifted off, and I just took off, and I never would have done that before.
Right.
I would have gone back and be like, "Hey, man, I'll see you later," and to make sure everybody knew that I was grateful for being there, and that to make sure everybody knew that I'd left.
Yeah.
But the reality is, man, I was done. And I just walked away. I walked home, and it was okay.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then there's been other times that I've got a text thread. I just call and say, hey, I need to go for a run. I need to go for a walk. I need to whatever. Still have my pull-up bar in the closet. I'm still wearing that thing out like crazy. And so I still, when I get to the point where I just get that angst, that's a go-to. I'm still doing that push-up, pull-up routine. And still challenging myself on that. And it's been fun to see what that's done, to my body over the last couple months. That's is just encouraging me to keep doing it.
That's awesome. Let me ask you this. I don't know. I'm going to pick a year, 5 years ago. So are there some things that 5 years ago, maybe you processed differently, you thought differently about, divorce, people being in the situation, that now having, just walked through this, the reality is it's been more than a year really, but that now, I don't know, maybe you have more empathy for, or you go, damn, that was kind of naive of me to think that way, or,
sure. Yeah, a lot of my joke is, when I'll hear some of the neighbors or whoever, some of the guys talk to their wives a little harsh, I'll say, yeah, I used to talk to my wife like that, and it really, it's funny just to watch the various reactions, because some guys know they're just being a jerk and being a dick. Come on, man, stop.
Yeah.
And then there's other times that you just kind of go, one of the stories, husband and wife were nagging at each other, and she was nagging at him a little bit more, and he walked away and towards me, and I kind of saw this whole thing, and they were both trying to get out of it but they both wanted the last word. It's this stupid argument. I don't even know what it was about. They probably don't even know what it was about, but they were bickering, and he walked away, rolled his eyes as he walked out, and I was just kind of there like, what do I do? Well, she looked at me and she goes, well, you remember being married, right? And I said, yeah, and I'd go back in a heartbeat.
Wow.
And I stared her down like, yeah, you know what? And I'd go back there in a heartbeat. And she goes, wow, I should be nicer. And I was like, you got to pick your battles. I'm not here to judge what they had going on and what was there. That's not the point. But the point is, that we take for granted. I mean, I definitely know, I've learned, I took my wife for granted a lot in a lot of ways. And so anyway, there's that part of it. And then there's the other side. When I used to think, man, I hated divorce. I was so committed, like I will not ever get divorced. And now, I got this egg on my face. And so when people come to me and ask questions, I'd say, man, I used to know all the answers.
Yeah.
And now I don't. Like, I can't tell you what to do. And before I was arrogant enough to think that I knew. I certainly still have my perspective and my thoughts to share, and I'm not shy about sharing my opinion for sure. But I used to be definitive, and now I'm realizing, you know what? God's grace covers a lot of stuff. And, you're the only one, and whoever, we are the only ones that know if we're stepping out of bounds and where we're going. Because, there's certainly some biblical principles that the boundaries are pretty clear. It's easy to call each other out and if we're being idiots or whatever, but there's a lot of nuance that I'm not an expert on anymore. And so I think that's been humbling, but it's been nice. The way that I give advice has changed a little bit for sure. We were playing cards one night, and somebody was asking, so what's the worst advice? I think you actually started the conversation.
Yeah.
Like, what's the worst advice you've ever gotten? And I was trying to think, and there's a couple things I could point to of like just stupid things that.
Yeah.
But my favorite line is when people would go, well, why don't you just whatever? And it's like, oh, gee, I never thought of that,
Right. Yeah.
Because if I just do this, well, then these 4 other pillars fall down.
Right.
So I can't just do this. I have to think about, the impact of that on everything else. And so it's become kind of the joke whenever there's a dilemma in the neighborhood, somebody's like, well, why don't you just, and everybody laughs. But that's true. And so the way that I give advice now is like, look, I don't know. Here's what I see. What's your gut tell you? And then I ask a lot more questions versus saying, well, this is what you should do.
Yeah.
Because I don't know, man.
Well, it feels like, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, but it feels like maybe 5 years ago, things were much more black and white, where now maybe you see some more gray areas. You go, maybe I can understand how a situation like this may happen. And it's, when Darius was on, we had a conversation about grace and truth.
Yeah.
And, it's some people are very heavy into truth, man. It's this way, or that.
Yeah, sure.
And sometimes when a situation like this happens, you start learning a lot more about grace.
Yeah. And, the truth doesn't change.
Right.
And that's a thing, so whenever I hear somebody ask her that question, even about, you see a little more gray, I think that's a slippery slope and we have to be careful. But to your point about grace, yeah, there is a lot more gray, and we have to be and that's why we talked about it last time. It's so important to build that band of brothers before you need them.
Yeah.
Right? Build those relationships before you need them so that there's no hesitation to make the phone call or to ask the opinion. You know who you can go to for what.
Yep.
Right? When you need your oil changed, you know who that buddy is that's going to help you with that.
Yeah.
You know who the techie is. You know who the whatever, the relationship.
Who can build the squat rack for you made out of wood. You got to have that.
Or who will figure it out without you knowing he doesn't know what he's doing. Yeah.
So I want to ask you this, and I know this can be, I don't know, maybe a little sensitive or not, but, some awkward moments. And I was thinking about when your dad came to town.
Yeah.
And, and once again, this is me a little bit projecting, but I'm thinking about, 5 years ago, knowing that your mom and dad had gotten divorced when you were younger, and some maybe feelings that were around that, and which probably also helped to create some of the beliefs about divorce and everything as well.
Absolutely.
That I'll never let this happen. And then all of a sudden you find yourself, and I just wonder, when you and your dad, connected, and they came to football practice and everything, how was that? I mean, how was a little more grace for him now, or,
yeah, for both of my parents, and just, my time with my dad has been so good, man. Just to, sometimes you just want to call somebody that knows. And so, I got a lot more of the story from my dad's perspective when I called, and I said, I remember the first time I ever called him and told him that I was getting divorced and that it was really happening. I was up in Wisconsin in a hotel room, and I just called him and I said, Dad, I don't know what to do. I need to, what did you do? Like, what was for you? And he's like, well, and he was he's such a wise guy, right? I mean, really smart and just very reserved, doesn't talk a whole lot. And when he does, it matters, it means something. And he just said, well, first of all, I can't tell you what to do. You're the only one's going to be able to do that. And so this is the first conversation we've really had about this. And that was back in, February, maybe. And so then, he's checked on me a whole lot more than he ever has. And so when they got to town, we spent, and of course I don't have a job, right? So we had all this time.
Right.
What a blessing it was.
Yeah.
Because we went to Rory's Diner in Parker, and
Okay.
I think they were here for 11 or 12 days, and they went to breakfast there, I think 6 or 7 times.
Oh my gosh.
So,
yeah.
Shameless plug for
There you go.
Rory's.
Yeah.
Go over there. But we just sat and drank coffee for hours, several days, just talking about various scenarios and why does it happen and how does it happen and what would you do differently and, where are you now?
Yeah.
And so, and then to watch them really plug into Joshua. And then my younger brother made the comment, and you could see it because they came first. Like my family just came and just really
Poured it
loved on me, man. I
Yeah.
mean, my brother and sister-in-law were here for a solid month. My sister-in-law is just an amazing, decorator and photographer and whatnot. And she rearranged the house. And so it just made it mine and really helped me with that eye. So that was huge. But one of the comments my younger brother made was he said, it's really nice to be around Joshua for longer than 72 hours. Because we'd fly into Georgia, we'd see him, we'd do a couple fun things, and then we'd fly out. And so they don't really get to see his, Joshua's personality or Joshua's who he is and what he's about. And then, so we have July 4th and the neighborhood's all together and Josh is playing with, the younger kids in the hood. And so Matt gets to see that. And so he made several comments like, wow, it's really fun to see who my nephew is, you know? And so I could tell that he had said that to, his mom, my stepmom and my dad, because they were just constantly going downstairs to watch Joshua play Fortnite to try to understand it. They don't get it, right?
Right, yeah,
but they're jumping into his world. And so just watching that interplay with my son and with my family, that has been really sweet. And, I don't know, I certainly don't want to blame anything on my ex-wife, but there's a different dynamic in my world now, and she probably has the same with her family, and that's cool. But, my family is rich, man, like just solid. And when you're with your wife and you're building all of that, it's really easy to lose perspective of not where you came from, but the connection that your family wants to have with you. And so that's been really, really cool.
Yeah.
So anyway, does that answer your question?
Yeah,
I want to make sure I stay faithful to that.
Yeah. So let's, one thing I got to mention. So, as you know, because you were there, obviously, son on the team, we lost the Super Bowl and 21-20. And that is that's 100% poor coaching on my part there. But it's been funny because a lot of people ask, hey, what would you do differently?
Sure.
And to be honest, I have not even gone back and watched the film. It was like, it plays in my head quite a bit, but I haven't gone back and watched it. And bad comparison, but I think it's so easy. The people would go, well, man, what would you have changed? Would you have done this? Did you not pray enough? Did you not this? How about your Bible study? Did you not do? And all these things that are like it doesn't matter. I mean, to be honest, it really doesn't matter.
Right.
I mean, you made a call, you ran a play. Here's what happened. I mean, and it's, I don't know, so easy. Once again, this is me projecting. So easy to go back and beat yourself up going, damn, I should have called that player. I should have done this. Because guys are going to be listening to this that are in a similar situation. And I think it's pretty natural to start, not playing the highlights, playing the lowlights. Man, I screwed up here. I screwed up here. Shouldn't have done this. Maybe I should have said that, or this was a warning sign or that, or, how do you deal with that?
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of demons there, and I've woken up in the middle of the night with all these kind of things on my mind. And, I look back and for me, Kevin, I made some mistakes early on in my marriage where I didn't really fully accept her for who she was. I had this version of her in my head, and I was, for lack of a better term, trying to coach her to be that. And then, it took me a lot of years and a lot of other guys around me that are further down the road and much wiser to say, hey, and so I feel like I did make some changes, but the pattern had already been established. And so, we got married at 22, so I didn't know any better, and so in realizing those things, it was just too little, too late to really do something about it. But then I look back. I mean, that's the play that I saw to call, right? And I was faithful to it, and I tried, and in my mind, I was doing the right thing. And I look back and I just think, man, if I'd have just taken a few more deep breaths. And so, I think probably where you're going with that is, okay, that's what. Then now, what do? Now you got a blank slate. Now you're, I don't want to be single the rest of my life. I love being married. I love being a dad and a husband and all that stuff. So I think that I'm going to be a lot more, I don't want to say patient, but a lot more pointed with, no, this is what I want, instead of trying to bend myself so much, because then that comes off as the expectation that she needs to bend herself to me.
Yeah.
And so right away, I mean, I can look back on times early in our first year of marriage where patterns got established. And so I would, I process that by saying, God, please don't let me do anything that's not in keeping with what you have made me to be and what you've made her to be, whoever's next for me. Let me honor you by honoring who you've created her to be and loving her that way, instead of trying to make her what I want and the version that I see, And then I think there's the other side too, man, that you got to have people believing in you. And so I've always valued the truth tellers in my life, and I've always tried to be a truth teller in other people's lives. And so if I see a different version of you that I think is good, I don't think it's wrong for me to cast that vision, to say, hey man, this is how I really see you. But there's, going back to Darius's deal about grace and truth, there's a delicate balance between the two.
Yeah.
And if you can't just be a truth bully, but you can't make everything okay with all grace. It's got to be a tension between the two. And so,
let me interject real quick, because I'd love to say this right here. Wisdom would be knowing when to speak grace or truth.
Right.
And so that comes really with experience.
Yeah. Or not when to not speak at all.
Yeah.
Just be there. Let them work it out.
Yeah. And that's, and if one is a truth teller, because that was definitely me, my first 3+ decades of my life, maybe even longer. Some people would say that, learning when to shut up, learning when to just listen, when to just let the light of grace, shine on people.
Sure.
Is huge.
And telling the truth doesn't always have to be harsh.
Right.
It doesn't have to be bad. This conversation I was telling you about in Moab with this guy, he made a comment about, he's asking, how'd you get through it? And I was talking about my faith and whatnot. And he said, well, now, I'm not on the same level as you guys are. And I said, hold on a minute, man.
Yeah.
He said, God has no more joy over me and my routine in the morning than he does about you switching the channel, and paying attention to him.
Yeah.
So God is just as joyful over you as he is over me. So don't think that I'm some superhero. That's not the point at all.
Yeah.
And so pointing out, truthfully telling him that, no, man, you're just as valuable as I am, and you have just as much to offer. It looks a little different, but you have just as much to offer this conversation as I do. So don't take yourself out of the game.
Yeah.
You have value to add. Stand up and add it. Don't shrink back on this thing. So that was kind of fun.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about other awkward situations.
Sure.
So when you're both at events.
That's where I thought you were going about when my parents came to town.
Yeah. So football events. I mean, year and party. I mean, you're there. I was standing at a position where there was a moment when it seemed like it was just you two were there and like everyone's leaving. And it was like, how do you prepare yourself for those? I mean, because it's coming.
Sure.
And I would imagine there's some part that people may go, well, shit, I'm not going, or
sure.
I'll just be the tough guy, or whatever. Like, how did you get yourself prepared for that?
Yeah, I don't know that you can prepare for that, because sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's really hard. And I think she's so beautiful. Like when I see her, I'm like, oh, I just remember, and she is, I can't ever take that away from her, nor would I ever want to. And she's an amazing woman. Like everything that her skill set, what she's able to do, I remember saying to you before that I really want to get healed up so that I can be at a point where I can celebrate her. And I remember saying, I'm not there yet, and I'm still not quite fully there, but there are times, I see something that I know that she's taught Joshua, and he's done it at home, and he's whatever. And I'm like, man, I'm so glad. And I tell him, I say, I'm so glad your mom taught you to do that. She's really good at blah, 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 whatever it is. Because I want him to know I have a high respect for his mom. And so, if there's a way to prepare myself for those awkward situations, it's, what, Joshua's watching me interact with his mom, and she's the most important woman to him. And so I'm going to stand in this awkwardness for him. Yeah. And two, I think it's each time it's part of my own healing. And I don't know what's going on in her mind, if she's feeling awkward. Well, I mean, there's definitely been moments where we've been talking and it's just like, okay, neither one of us has anything else to say. And, before I would just stand there and stare at her. And now I just like, okay, and I'll just walk away. And she's done the same thing where, okay, the conversation's over. Let's just, and there's no ugly, exchange, which again, it could be so much worse, right?
Yep.
So I think too, I want grace from her. I know that there are times, like when I went to Moab, she kept Josh an extra night so that I could go to the trip, and she took him on a trip, and I kept the dog a couple extra nights. This is just working things out, right? Yeah. We can still be friends. We can still be it doesn't have to be a tug of war all the time. And certainly Josh was at the age where he's going to decide where he wants to be and where he wants to go, and in just a few short years. And so how we handle this now is going to determine a lot about how he feels and where he wants to be. And so I think that's just, I want grace from her. So I'm going to give her lots of grace. And man, I still love her. I still care deeply about her. And so I don't want to do things that are just going to make it hard for her, or try to be mean to her, or it's just not my nature. It just doesn't do anybody any good. And I feel like she's in the same boat, that she's not trying to make my life hard. We're both, the fighting is, and we really didn't fight all that much about stuff. It was just the tension of, well, that's mine, this is yours, and that's over with. Yeah. And now it's all comes down to Joshua. All the terms have been set for the divorce. All the terms of the separation agreement are done. And now it's just executing those. Yeah. A whole lot easier for me to execute now with a job.
Well, I was half expecting you to tell me again. I'm sure Stephen was expecting this too. You say, well, it's a double shot of Jameson before you meet, and then you're ready to go.
No, I wasn't going to throw that out there, Kevin, but I did. There was one particular time that I did have an extra little something before I went.
Little pregame, little something.
It was, I think I remember saying on the last episode, or last time we talked, that, I had more alcohol in the last 3 months or whatever, because all you guys kept showing up and bringing me beers, Yeah. And that slowed down a little bit, and it's good. I mean, I do, even just telling you right now, there's a lot more peace in my soul right now. Absolutely. And, I have my moments still. I still buckle every once in a while, and but those are fewer and further between. And a lot of that has to do with the reconnections that I've gotten. I don't say reconnections, but the strengthened connections I've gotten with my family, with some friends that, just, and again, hearing people's stories and being able to connect, and now to understand the value that I have to offer others that are just starting to face this story or this situation, to say, hey, here's what I did that I wish I hadn't done. And here's what I did that I'm really glad I did. Yeah. Now, whatever that is for you, but if you know something in your gut that you're supposed to do, man, do it. Yeah. And just being an encouragement for somebody. And then the guy in Moab, there was a moment where when he told me about he hadn't seen his kid for a while, and we just stared at each other, and I started to tear up a little, and I was giving him permission, and we were both like, we don't know each other that well,
Right.
There's this moment, and I said, you know what? Sometimes this just effing sucks, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And he goes, yeah. And then later on,
am I allowed to say that?
Yeah, later on, and because he's like looking at me as some great whatever saint, and like, dude, sometimes I gave him the whole line about sitting in the shit. Sometimes you just got to sit there, but don't miss what you're supposed to learn, because when you come out of it, that's what where my hope is now, is I am definitely on the way out. I'm not done yet, but I'm on the way out. And I heard some pastor wrote this book, and the gist of it was, you can't ever shorten your time in the wilderness, but you sure can lengthen it. The Israelites were supposed to be in the wilderness for 2.5 years. Well, they ended up being there for 40 years because they were idiots, right? And they didn't learn what they were supposed to learn. And so I'm looking at my situation now going, I don't want to be here any longer than I'm supposed to be. But I don't want to miss what I'm supposed to learn in the process.
That's really good. Well, a couple more questions that I have for you, and then a couple comments that I have. So some of the trigger moments when people go through a divorce, a death of a spouse, sometimes, I've heard that a death would almost be easier than a divorce, but some of those trigger moments would be birthdays, anniversaries.
All the firsts.
And here we are knocking on the door of holidays.
Yeah.
How do you prepare yourself for these?
I don't know. I'm trying.
Yeah.
I don't know. Joshua's birthday was October 17th. That was her weekend. So I didn't have him on his birthday.
Yeah.
That was hard.
Yeah.
It was really hard. All the firsts, man. And everybody says that's why I swore off any dating or anything until at least January, because that'll be a year that she told me, but Thanksgiving, I have him for Thanksgiving. I don't have him for Christmas. And I don't know. I think just like anything, it's you get out of bed and the alarm's going to go off just the same as it does every other day. And I have one foot in front of the other, and just really trying to be grateful for the time that I have with him, and then maximizing that time versus, I've had friends call and want to go do this or that during the time I've got him. And sometimes I've done it because he wants to be home playing video games anyway, it's not like me being on for a couple hours is going to be that big a deal. But just recognizing, man, I've got 4 years and he's gone, and that time's cut in half. And so, just when I'm with him, I try to be much more mindful that, yeah, he's annoying me right now, but I'm so glad he's here. Or just being present, then he'll turn and he'll make a comment to me, and I'm like, that fills my bucket so much that, So, I'll tell you next week, right? Next week's going to be a thing. I mean, his mom's a phenomenal cook, and this is the first Thanksgiving that she's not cooking for us, and so I anticipate there'll be some difficult moments, especially at Christmas time when, I'm always anticipating what time he's going to wake up, and kind of, that'll be hard for him not to be there. But, it's, I don't know.
Well, it's interesting when you were saying that, and especially, about Josh and just the time that, you get to have with him and end up being cut short. When we adopted our boys, 8-9 years ago now, I would have people ask me questions. Hey, so what have you learned about being a dad, and different things. And I remember this hit me, and this was probably, 2-3 years into it. And it, this part, the part of my life, my relationship with God had been many decades at this point. But I said, for the first time in my life, I can at least appreciate at some small level when I've heard that God is jealous for us.
Yeah.
Because I can now begin to appreciate how jealous I am for my boys. And that can be anything from them playing a video game instead of playing with me, or them wanting to be with their friends or on their phone, or, or whatever it is, the jealousness that I would feel for them. And then to, it just hit me when you said, it's 4.5 years, but I'm gonna get half. And I was like, holy shit, man, like that just hit me right there. And just that jealousness, and it is a righteous jealousness, but it's a jealousness nonetheless. And so I want to commend you, Ryan, because, I'm watching you really as a mighty man of valor who is fighting through this. But most of all, I see you fighting for the heart of your son in the way that you communicate in so many different levels, the way that you have stood and fought for him in ways that he doesn't even recognize. I promise you, he doesn't recognize.
Right.
And he may not appreciate for years and years to come. But great job there.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
It's hard.
We probably both had, especially from your line of work, have had some people that have, and I wrote down cancer. So, that have gone through a traumatic event like cancer like that and come out on the other side. And I don't know if you're here yet, but I will say there will be a moment that you're going to look back and you're going to be able to go, man, when you hear people say, thank God I had cancer. My perspective changed so much. These situations happened. I appreciated my son, my life, my, whatever it is. And so, I want you to know there's going to be a moment that you're going to look back and I don't know, maybe we'll call it the cancer moment or whatever. When you look back and you will see, not that you are glad that you had cancer, not that you're glad that you went through a divorce, but you're going to be able to go, man, because of this, this is the impact I can have. These are lives I get to touch. This is a story I get to tell. This is the relationship that I have now. This is how I demonstrated for my son how to deal with adversity that may not be of your choosing. And so I just want you to know that you're going to come out on the other side and you're going to be telling a story. And right now you're writing every single day based on the habits that you're doing, the pillars, and how you're starting your day, to how you're responding, to his mom and to him and the friends and everything. You're writing that story that you're going to be telling him, and he's going to be reading that for a long, long time. And right now, the beginning chapters of this phase, you're doing an amazing job. So just keep it up.
Oh, thank you. That's very kind of you to say. When you were asking about awkward situations and how do you prepare yourself for those interactions, right away, he recognized it was really difficult for me to be around his mom. And he made a comment on the way home from something. And I just said, I stopped the car and I said, hold on, let me tell you something. I said, you matter to me more than anything else. And you matter to your mom more than anything else in this world. And I said, so here's my commitment to you. I can't speak for your mom, but my commitment to you, Joshua, is that I will never not show up to something that's important to you because I need to avoid your mom. Mm. And so there were times that I thought, I don't want to go.
It's a hard commitment to keep.
Right? But I told him, and so, it's when you make a commitment, you got to keep it, man. I mean, that's the whole thing is so hard for me with the divorce is because I made the commitment and fully committed to keeping it and all that. And, one of the things I've already been able to look back to some degree, this hurts so bad. And the only reason that it hurts is because you give yourself to it. Mm. And so you made a comment after we were kind of debriefing the last podcast and you said, the words that you used, and it really hit me, or the only thing I really heard was love fully, and you can't have a buddy that used to work with, you say, you got to risk it for the biscuit, and I think about that all the time with various things, but if you don't take a risk with your own heart, you can never really love somebody completely and never love somebody just fully. And so I've taken that, you said that, and I've thought about that constantly. I've written about it several times, and I've shared it with several people that, the only reason it hurts is because you care, because you really have given yourself to it. And then on the other side, the love that I have to offer somebody else is full. It doesn't have to be a broken love. Yeah. It's an informed love, and it's redeemed, I guess, or whatever. And it's not full yet. It's not 100% ready. I'm not ready to hold somebody's heart again yet, but I'm a whole lot closer now than I was 5 months ago. And, just when you come to the end of yourself, that's when you realize that Jesus being everything, Jesus keeping his promise to be close to the brokenhearted, that's true. Mm. That is so true. And all the struggles that I've had, the insecurities, I just keep bringing them to him. God, show me, how do I shore these up? Yeah. Some of these are just self-discipline, right? Because I'm lazy on some things. Sure. And so show me, where is it self-discipline, and where do I just need to sit and rest and trust and believe that the gospel is for me too.
Yeah.
And that was another big, I could go on for hours, man, but big thing. I did a men's retreat several months ago. I think I told you about this. And the exercise that they made me go through was about anger, getting your anger out. And so I just let it out, here, blah, screaming and yelling and all these things. And they made me act as if one of the other guys was God or was Jesus, and tell him what's going on. And so I told him, and then the whole time he's got me holding a bucket full of rocks. Like I'm holding a bucket full of rocks, and it's getting heavy, right?
Right.
We're there for like 15 minutes. I mean, it's heavy. And so I'm just unloading. I'm unloading. And then he goes, all right, now what do you want him to do with that bucket? And so I said, would you just take this from me? This anger, this angst, this insecurity, this whatever, just take it. And so he did. He reached out and he grabbed the bucket, and in that instant, oh man, wow, I didn't realize how heavy that was.
Wow.
Then he made me switch places, and he goes, now I want you to pretend you're Jesus and you're talking to yourself. And Kevin, it was like, it hit me. I just preached to the guy, right? I preached the gospel to myself, and it hit me after that, processing that, journaling about that when you came to me, or anybody came to me and had a problem or had a sin they wanted to confess or had whatever, man, I got the gospel all day long for you. All day long. I know it inside and out, and I can tell you, I can point to the scriptures, but when it came to believing it for myself, I had doubts, and I had questions that I thought I had answered years ago. And now I'm really at the end of myself. And to hear that the gospel is for me too, it was incredible revelation in my soul. And so going back to how do I give advice is different. How do I share my story is different. Say, man, every man has to confront that in himself, and giddy up, whatever. Let's do it. There's nothing you're going to find in me that Jesus hasn't redeemed. So get to finding it.
Yeah.
I want to be who I am. I want to be honest about it. I want to be candid and bold about it. I don't want to shy away from that. I don't want to bend myself to somebody else. I want to be who I'm created to be. And there's this inner strength I always knew I had, but I didn't realize it was as badass as it is.
Well, Ryan Owens, you are a badass dad. And, I love that image of you, holding the rocks. And I can only imagine just, I can see your arm shaking in that moment, and just being asked, what do you want to do? And then handing it and just feeling that relief. And I think that alone is going to help so many guys. And I'd be greatly remiss if I didn't say, well, Andy Stanley would be very proud of you for, making sure you wait 1 year to before you get back out there.
Sure.
And that's some of his great advice as well. So, man, thank you so much. I want to once again commend you, man, for just being a mighty man of valor and fighting for your heart, fighting for your son's heart, even fighting for your son's mom's heart. And man, there are some amazing blessings, and you're going to be telling the story for a long, long time. And I love how you're writing these chapters right now. So keep up the great work.
Thanks, man. I appreciate the opportunity to be here. And when you asked me, I thought, oh man, what's he going to ask me this time? And I just came into it like, I know your heart for me, and I'm grateful for that. Thanks for your friendship, and thanks for the opportunity again to just throw it out there, because it's been fun. I shared the recording, before with a lot of my close buddies, and I got some really fun feedback on their perspective. So I look forward to doing the same with this one. And I just know I'm grateful.
Oh, that's great.
Thanks.
Well, hey guys, we are a band of brothers committed to forging stronger fathers, and Badass Dads working together. It has to be us all working together. And so I'm excited about, we got some new things that are happening right after the first of the year that I cannot wait to tell you about, some interviews, some doors that are opening for us. So thank you for your support. Thank you for your encouragement. Check us out on the Instagrams. I'm at least getting one out a week. I can do better, but I'm at least getting one out a week. The website is available too. So that's BadAssDads.org. And man, have a badass day, have badass holidays, and we are out. Hey guys, just want to thank you so much for listening to the Badass Dad podcast. We do need your help though. A couple different things that we could use. We want to grow our podcast and our message out there. We are getting so much great feedback from you guys, but we need your help. So we want to make it into the top 10. So if you could please, share. I guess sharing the podcast is a huge benefit. Also, if you'll comment. So if you'll leave us a comment, like leave us a review, and some 5 stars would be great. The other thing is, if you have a subject you'd love us to cover, maybe there's something you like the subject shows or an interview, or if there's someone you want us to interview, if you could communicate with us, you can hit me up at kdh@badad.org. So that's kdh@badad.org, or you can go to our Instagram, which is Badass Dads Podcast, and leave us a direct message there. And I'd love to interview people, love to hit the subjects you guys want to hear more about. Thank you so much for helping us grow.